You know that kind of choice you make even when you know it could go wrong? Well, that's exactly what happened to me that night. I work as an escort in Rio's nightlife scene at a famous club in the North Zone. I've seen and lived through plenty, but nothing could have prepared me for what was about to unfold. It was a Friday. Business was slow when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me click. "Hello, Luana." A deep male voice, well-mannered. He said he'd found me through a referral and wanted to hire me for a service. Nothing unusual there. But what he said next set off every alarm in my head. "I want you to come to my house. It's in a remote area, but I'll pay you triple your usual rate." Triple? That was an absurd amount of money. I hesitated. "Remote? How remote? Is it safe?" The guy laughed somewhat awkwardly. "Relax, it's fine. I just want company. I've been living alone since my wife passed away." I was torn, but the money was too good to refuse. And the truth is, my bills weren't giving me any breathing room. I accepted. We arranged a time and he sent me the address. When I got into the rideshare car, the discomfort began creeping in. The route became increasingly desolate, with poorly lit streets and a silence that only made things worse. The driver, a friendly older man, looked at me through the rearview mirror and asked, "First time going to this area?" "More or less," I replied. He paused before responding. "It's nothing, just be careful." That phrase kept hammering in my head as he continued down the dirt road. When we finally arrived, I almost asked him to take me back. The house was isolated, old, with peeling walls and flickering lights on the porch. Something already felt wrong, but I ignored my instinct. And look, that was my first mistake. When I knocked on the door, I felt the cold air. The house seemed to want to swallow me whole. It opened slowly, and there he was. Roberto, a tall, thin guy with a smile that seemed rehearsed. "You must be Luana. Come in, please." The interior wasn't any better than the outside. The smell of mold was strong, and the furniture looked like it came from an abandoned thrift store. He closed the door behind me, turning the lock with deliberate slowness. I felt a chill run through me. "Everything okay? You seem a bit nervous," he asked, while pointing to a well-set dining table. "No, I'm fine, just tired from the trip." We sat at the table and he started asking questions. At first, they were normal things. Where I was from, how long I'd been working. But soon he began venturing into strange territory. "Do you believe in destiny, Luana? That some people are chosen for greater things?" I laughed nervously. I don't know. I don't really think about that." He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was as if he'd liked my answer for some reason I couldn't understand. While he talked, my eyes started scanning the house. The windows had bars on the inside, and the front door had a reinforced lock. It was as if the house was designed to keep people from leaving. Suddenly, he said something that froze me. "You know you're special, right? I can sense it. Maybe you're the only one who can complete what I started." My heart raced. I tried to play it cool, but I knew something was terribly wrong. After that sentence, everything in me screamed that I needed to get out of there. The problem was, I had no idea how. Have you ever felt like the air itself was warning you to run, but your feet refused to move? Roberto seemed to read my mind because he kept watching me for several seconds, as if measuring my reaction. "You're tense, Luana. Relax. The night is just beginning." He smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. And forced a laugh, trying to appear unconcerned. "I'm not tense, just found the place a bit strange, you know? It's really isolated. Yes, I like tranquility. I hate being disturbed. Here, no one bothers us." He said this with a calmness that only made me more nervous. While he spoke, my mind was racing at 1,000 miles per hour. I needed to find a way out. I started noticing details around me. The bars on the windows, the heavy lock on the door. This wasn't normal. Then he began asking questions. First about my life. "Do you have family? Anyone living with you?" Then more personal things. "Have you ever thought about how you'd like to die?" That last one made me freeze. My heart pounded, but I forced a smile. What a weird question. No, I've never thought about it. Ah, you should. Everyone should. Death is inevitable, but the way it happens, that makes all the difference. My throat went dry. I needed to buy time, so I feigned interest. Why are you talking about this? He shrugged. Because I think you're different, Luana. Maybe that's why you're here today at this moment. He stood up, saying he was going to get more wine. As soon as he left, my instinct screamed, "Find an exit now!" I got up slowly and started walking through the living room. There was a hallway leading to 2 doors. One was locked, but the other was slightly ajar. Inside, I saw stairs descending to a basement. Something about that place pulled at me, even as fear told me not to go. Share in the comments a truth beginning with, "I recognize that." Because when we name our fears, we begin to understand the warnings our intuition has been sending us all along. I descended the stairs slowly, my heart nearly bursting from my chest. Each step creaked, and I held my breath to avoid making noise. The smell down there was worse, mold mixed with something I couldn't identify, but it was horrible. When I reached the bottom, the weak light from a hanging bulb illuminated the space. It was like a workshop, but with a macabre touch. There was a table with tools, pliers, knives, even a hammer. Beside it, a cabinet full of objects that didn't belong to Roberto. Women's shoes, purses, even identity documents. The worst came when I saw the wall. There were several photos hanging, all of women smiling. Next to each photo, suspended from nails, were their personal belongings. Necklaces, earrings, pieces of clothing. It was as if he collected fragments of each one. My body froze. Fear consumed me completely. I couldn't move my legs. That's when I heard footsteps. Roberto was coming back. My brain went into full panic mode. I looked around and saw a large closet. I hid inside, trying to control my breathing, but it was nearly impossible. His footsteps grew louder, and then I heard his voice. "You came down, Luana. Curious, aren't you? This always happens. Don't worry. I'll find you." The sound of his boots echoed through the basement. He was getting closer. My chest rose and fell so rapidly, I thought he'd hear me. Then he stopped right in front of the closet where I was hiding. "I'm going to count to 3. If you come out, I promise it won't hurt." I was there, huddled inside the closet, hearing his count begin. 1. My head was spinning wildly. What was I going to do? I had no way to fight him. 2. My hands desperately searched inside the closet for something, anything that could become a weapon. 3. The closet door flew open with a jerk, and there he was, staring at me with that empty gaze. By reflex, I grabbed the first object I found, a piece of rusted pipe, and struck him on the head. Roberto stumbled backward, holding the side of his face, and I ran. "You're going to regret this, you wretch!" he screamed, his voice reverberating through the basement. I climbed those stairs as if my life depended on it. And well, it did. When I reached the hallway, I ran straight to the front door, but it was locked. The key. I knew I'd seen a key in the basement hanging on the wall near the tool table. I took a deep breath and forced myself to go back. My body trembled so much it felt like my legs would give out, but I knew I had no choice. When I descended again, he wasn't there. The silence was terrifying. I grabbed the key from the wall with shaking hands, and at that exact moment, I heard footsteps behind me. "You think you can escape, Luana?" His voice came like thunder. I turned and saw Roberto coming toward me with one of the pliers in his hand. My heart nearly stopped. Without thinking, I threw a chair in his direction and ran again. He tripped and fell, letting out a scream of rage, but I was already halfway up the stairs, climbing faster than I thought possible. I reached the hallway and went straight to the front door. My hands trembled so much it was hard to fit the key in the lock, but after several desperate attempts, I managed it. The door opened and the cold night air hit my face. I ran, ran like I'd never run before, stumbling over dirt and branches while hearing his screams behind me. "You won't escape, Luana. I always catch them all." The darkness made everything even more terrifying. I couldn't see where the road ended, and I just kept moving forward, praying for someone to appear. What would you do if you realized that the person you trusted had been planning your end from the very beginning? That's when I saw the lights of a car in the distance. I screamed with all my strength, waving frantically. The car slowed down, and the driver, a middle-aged man, stopped. "Miss, what happened?" He looked frightened, seeing me in that state. "Please get me out of here, he's going to kill me." Without asking more questions, he opened the door, and I got in. I looked back as he accelerated, but Roberto wasn't there anymore. It was as if he'd vanished into the darkness. My whole body was shaking, but I could finally breathe. When the car took off, I finally felt like I'd escaped, but adrenaline still coursed through my body, and every shadow on the road seemed like Roberto coming after me. "Miss, what happened? Are you hurt?" the driver asked, looking at me through the rearview mirror. I could only shake my head. My voice was stuck, but after a few seconds I managed to let it out. He tried to kill me." I told the basics of the story while he drove fast. The man who introduced himself as Paulo seemed as scared as I was. "I've heard stories about that region, but I never imagined something like this," he commented with a serious face. He took me straight to the police station. When I entered, still dirty and with uneven breathing, the officers looked at me as if they already knew something bad had happened. I explained everything, from the invitation to the moment I managed to escape. One of the officers, an older, calm man, listened to me in silence, noting every detail. When I finished, he took a deep breath and said, "Miss, you have no idea how lucky you were. Leave in the comments your reflections starting with 'I commit to', because recognizing the moments when we ignored our intuition can save us from repeating the same patterns, and your voice might be the warning someone else desperately needs to hear." We've been receiving reports about women disappearing in that area, but no one ever came back to tell the story. Those words sent a chill down my spine. "And you never investigated?" I asked, almost indignant. "Concrete evidence is difficult, but now with what you've told us, we're going there." They left that same night. I stayed at the station waiting for news, but inside, I knew what they were going to find. A few hours later, the older officer returned, his face serious. "We found the house. Everything you described was there. The basement, the photos, the objects from the other women, but he escaped." My heart sank. Even after everything I'd been through, he was still out there. The days that followed were difficult. I could barely sleep. Every noise seemed like him coming back for me. But at the same time, I knew I needed to keep going. Surviving was a miracle, and I wasn't going to let that be in vain. I decided to share my story anonymously on a blog. I told every detail of that night, from the initial discomfort to the escape. I ended with a warning. If something feels wrong, listen to your instinct. Nothing is worth more than your life. I also quit working at the club. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew I couldn't continue in the same life after what happened. I found a job as an attendant in a small store. It was simple, but it gave me a sense of security I hadn't felt in a long time. From time to time, I receive updates from the police. They continue investigating Roberto, but he still hasn't been found. That uncertainty haunts me, but it also reminds me that I'm strong. I survived. My story became a warning, and I hope it saves other women. Because in the end, what matters is that I wasn't just another victim. I lived to tell the tale. Hi everyone, my name is Renata. If you're hearing this story, it's because I managed to survive something that seemed impossible. It's not easy to remember, but I feel like I need to tell this. If my experience saves someone's life, it will have been worth it. I worked as a luxury escort in São Paulo. It wasn't an easy choice, but life pushed me onto this path. My mother was sick, bills were piling up, and honestly, I didn't see another way out. Working at Club Venus, a fancy nightclub in the city, I made good money, but the money never seemed to be enough. One night, while I was in the VIP lounge, a man appeared. He was different from the others, elegant, confident, but with a somewhat enigmatic air. He introduced himself as Eduardo. "Renata, right? I've heard incredible things about you. I have a proposal that will interest you." I smiled but remained suspicious. Eduardo explained that he had a foreign client willing to pay a fortune for a weekend in the countryside. He mentioned a luxurious resort and a fee that could solve all my problems. It seemed too good to be true. I hesitated. Something about him bothered me, but at the same time, the amount was too high for me to refuse. He noticed my doubt and said, "You deserve something better. This is your chance." 2 days later, I was at the private hangar at Congonhas Airport. When I arrived, I saw 3 other women, all beautiful, but you could tell they were as nervous as I was. The plane was small and luxurious, but the atmosphere was strange. Eduardo was on the flight, but didn't give much information. I tried to make conversation, but he deflected. When I asked where exactly the resort was, he smiled. "Calm down, Renata. You're going to love it." After hours of flying, we landed on an isolated runway surrounded by forest. It wasn't an airport, it was a strip in the middle of nowhere. A car was already waiting and took us to a gigantic mansion. The place was beautiful, but there was something sinister about it. When we arrived, they confiscated our cell phones and documents. They said it was for security. I started to feel a chill in my stomach that wouldn't go away. The mansion had armed guards everywhere, all the doors locked. I knew something was very wrong. It was that night that everything became clear. At dinner, I sat next to a woman named Camila. She was more nervous than me, and when she realized no one was paying attention, she pulled me aside. "Renata, we're in a trap. This isn't work. It's human trafficking." My heart froze. I wanted to believe she was exaggerating, but everything made sense. The isolation, the guards, the lack of communication. Camilla told me they'd brought other women there before and that no one knew what happened to them afterward. "We need to get out of here," she said with tears in her eyes. We started planning an escape, but it was difficult. The mansion seemed like a fortress. That night they organized a party. They called in rich, influential men who looked at us like merchandise. I'd never felt so vulnerable. Have you ever wondered why we sometimes silence the voice inside that's screaming danger, choosing instead to trust the promises of strangers? It was during the party that we saw an opportunity. One of the security guards stepped out to smoke and left a side door unlocked. Camilla and I exchanged glances. We didn't need words. We waited for the right moment and ran. We passed through the door without being noticed. The alarm went off, and I heard footsteps behind us. Write in the comments a declaration beginning with "I decide," because the moment we choose to honor our survival instinct over convenience or desperation, we reclaim the power that fear tries to steal from us. And your decision today might echo in someone else's moment of doubt tomorrow. I heard. We kept running. "Renata, don't stop!" Camilla screamed. We reached a locked gate. Camilla tried to open it but couldn't. That's when one of the guards appeared with a gun pointed at us. He had a cruel smile on his face. "Go ahead, run!" Without thinking, I grabbed a rock from the ground and threw it at his face. He fell, screaming in pain, and Camilla managed to grab the keys from his pocket. We opened the gate and ran into the forest surrounding the mansion. The forest was dense, dark, and terrifying. Every branch that broke under my feet seemed like a scream. I heard the barking of dogs and the shouts of the guards. They were hunting us. "Renata, we can't stop," Camilla kept saying. I was exhausted, but adrenaline pushed me forward. Each step was a struggle. My feet hurt, my body was scratched. But I knew that if I stopped, it would be my end. After hours of walking, we saw lights in the distance. It was a small village with simple houses. When we knocked on a door, a man opened it, startled. He looked at us, dirty and desperate, and let us in. We told him everything that happened. He was shocked, but called the police. A few hours later, they arrived. The operation at the mansion was quick, but not all the women were found. Eduardo and the others had fled, taking some victims with them. I felt immense relief at being alive, but the guilt of not having been able to save all the women still haunts me. Today, I'm here telling this story, not to play the victim, but to warn other women. This type of trap exists, and no one is immune. If something seems too good to be true, be suspicious. I escaped, but many don't have the same luck. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it serves as a warning. My name is Natalia, and what I'm going to tell you here isn't just any story. It's something that marked my life and made me question everything. I've been working the streets for a few years now. It's not what I wanted for myself, but it's what I had. Deserted early mornings, cars passing quickly, and the constant feeling that someone could hurt you. It's not just the cold on your skin, it's the fear that sticks to your soul. That night, business was slow. I was tired, thinking about going home, when a black car, one of those expensive ones, stopped very slowly. The window rolled down, and the driver was an elegant man, well-dressed with a smile that seemed harmless. He asked my name, and after a quick exchange of words, made a proposal that left me speechless. He offered 5 times more than I usually charge for a meeting at a private location. I hesitated. The place was a house on the outskirts of the city, and something in his tone made me alert. But the money was a lot of money. I had overdue bills and my mother needed expensive medication. Against my instinct, I accepted. He opened the car door with the greatest courtesy, but the silence on the way to the location made me uncomfortable. After about 20 minutes on the road, we arrived. It was an old mansion in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by brush. The windows were huge, and the house looked abandoned, with peeling paint and a rusty gate. He told me to wait in a room while he got something. The room was dark, with old furniture and the smell of mold. I sat on a dust-covered sofa, but something inside me was already screaming that this was wrong. While I waited, I started noticing details. There was a purse thrown on the floor, half hidden under a table. It was a woman's purse. The table, in turn, had scratch marks as if someone had dragged their nails there. My stomach turned when I saw something in the corner, a small woman's shoe with dark stains. Suddenly, reality hit me. I had fallen into a trap. I tried to calm myself, thinking about how to get out of there without raising suspicion. That's when I heard footsteps. I looked toward the dark hallway and saw his shadow approaching. He entered the room with a smile, but now his eyes were different, cold, calculating. He was holding rope and a piece of duct tape. "I promise this won't take long," he said with frightening calmness. My mind was screaming, but I couldn't freak out. I tried to smile and said I needed to use the bathroom. He hesitated, but eventually agreed. I walked to the hallway with my heart in my throat. In the bathroom, I started looking for something to defend myself with. I found a piece of glass on the floor. I picked it up and held it tight, trying to control the trembling in my hands. When I came out, he was there, standing, staring at me. I tried to pass him, but he grabbed my arm forcefully. It was instinct. I attacked with the glass, cutting his arm. He screamed and I ran down the hallway. The problem was that the house was a labyrinth, with locked doors and jammed windows. He came after me, cursing, promising he'd make me pay. I entered a room and locked the door. Inside was a scene I'll never forget. Several purses and women's clothing thrown in a corner, along with documents. They belonged to other women who probably hadn't made it out of there alive. On the floor, I found a wrench. I grabbed it and hid behind the door. I knew he was going to break in and I needed to be ready. When he managed to enter, he came at me with everything. But he wasn't expecting the blow. I hit his head with all my strength. He fell to the floor, moaning but not unconscious. I ran again. The front door was locked, but I saw a half-open window. I jumped through it, cutting my arm on the glass, but I didn't stop. What would it mean to you to trust that voice inside that whispers run, even when logic says stay? Outside, the night was cold, and the silence was even more terrifying. I ran through the brush without looking back until I reached the road. Minutes later, I saw headlights in the distance. I threw myself in the middle of the lane, waving and screaming. The truck braked hard. Share in the comments your experience, starting with, "I have learned that." Because when we honor the wisdom born from our darkest moments, we transform our pain into protection for others. And your truth might be the light that guides someone out of their own darkness. The truck stopped abruptly, and the driver got out, frightened. I told him between sobs what had happened. He put me in the truck and called the police while driving. When we arrived at the station, I was still trembling. The police acted quickly and went to the mansion. They found the man unconscious and evidence that he was part of a human trafficking scheme. He lured vulnerable women to that house, promising easy money, but they never left. After that night, I promised myself I would never return to that life. I managed to get off the streets with help from NGOs and my own willpower. It wasn't easy, but I did it. Today, I tell my story to warn other women. Danger can be where we least expect it, and never ignore the instinct that tells you to run. It can save your life. I'm not going to lie, my life was never easy. I always had to fend for myself, and that's why I chose a job that gave me more freedom. I'm a luxury escort. I work at Eclipse nightclub, a famous nightclub in downtown Sao Paulo, where luxury and danger walk hand in hand. That night, everything seemed normal. Clients full of money, loud music, and that usual energy. That's when he appeared. Eduardo, an elegant man, well-dressed, with an easy smile that seemed to have been practiced in the mirror. He ordered a drink and watched me for a while before finally coming to talk to me. "Camilla, right?" he asked with a firm but friendly voice. I smiled, already used to this type of approach. "Depends on who wants to know." He laughed, and that already made me a bit suspicious. Eduardo didn't seem like a regular client. He was direct, but had a polite manner that made you lower your guard without even realizing it. He said he was in the city on business, but wanted company for a different kind of night. He offered an absurd amount, something I only heard about in the backstage of the club, for a meeting at his farm on the outskirts of Sao Paulo. The money was too good to say no, but at the same time, my instinct screamed that something wasn't right. Even so, I accepted. Yeah, I know. I should have trusted my instinct. Before leaving, I sent a message to Vanessa, my best friend. I passed along the farm's address and asked her to call me in the middle of the night just to make sure everything was okay. While his driver took me, I tried to relax, but part of me couldn't. Something about that man and that invitation bothered me. When I arrived, I was impressed with the place. The farm was huge, with an iron gate that looked like something out of a movie. The house lights illuminated the path, but the silence was so deep you could hear my own heartbeat. Eduardo received me with that charming smile, and for a moment I managed to relax. "Welcome, Camilla. I hope the trip wasn't tiring," he said, extending his hand. The house was luxurious, with furniture that looked like it came out of a magazine, but there was something strange. Despite all the beauty, the place seemed empty. There were no family photos, not even that kind of mess that makes a home feel lived in. Eduardo served wine, put on soft music, and tried to make me comfortable. But while he talked, my eyes went to the details. In the living room, I saw a scarf hanging on a chair that looked very feminine, a solitary earring on the side table. I didn't want to be paranoid, but all of this made me even more alert. During dinner, he told some stories about his travels, but it seemed like he was reciting things while speaking. And when I mentioned that I had sent my location to my friend, Eduardo froze for a second. It was quick, but I noticed. "Ah, that's very responsible of you. I admire careful women, he said with that smile that no longer seemed so charming. My heart started beating faster. Something was wrong, and I needed to figure out what it was without letting him notice. I kept smiling, pretending to be interested in the stories Eduardo told, but my mind was already racing. Every word of his seemed carefully calculated, as if he were trying to impress me, or worse, distract me. The discomfort I felt grew with each minute. He started asking about my life, but without seeming really interested. It seemed more like a strategy to make me lower my guard. And you, Camila, have you ever thought about leaving this life? Someone like you deserves much more. I laughed awkwardly. This wasn't the first time I'd heard something like that, but coming from him it sounded strange. I've thought about it, but it's complicated. Things aren't always that simple, you know. He agreed with a smile and refilled my wine glass again, as if he wanted to make me relax. Only at that moment, relaxing was the last thing I could do. Hasn't it happened to you that your body knows the truth before your mind accepts it? When every cell screams danger while your voice still says it's fine. I needed an excuse to get out of there, at least for a few minutes, to think. Can I use the bathroom? I asked, trying to seem casual. Leave your testimony in the comments with the words, I illuminate. Because when we shine light on the shadows where predators hide, we create a map of survival for those who walk behind us. And your courage to speak might be the beacon that saves a life tonight. I asked. Sure, it's at the end of the hallway on the right. I got up and went there, but instead of going into the bathroom, I started exploring the house. The silence was almost suffocating, and each of my steps seemed to echo off the walls. Then, at the end of the hallway, I noticed a locked door. A small key was lying on a nearby table. My curiosity spoke louder. I picked up the key with trembling hands and opened the door. When I entered, my heart almost stopped. It was a small room, but it looked like something out of a nightmare. Women's clothing was scattered around, along with jewelry and personal belongings. On a table, there were photos, many photos. Women smiling, women crying, women unconscious. I recognized some of them from TV reports. They were missing persons. My body froze. Every fiber of my being wanted to run from there, but my feet wouldn't obey. Everything made sense now. The scarf in the living room, the earring, Eduardo's strange behavior. He wasn't who he said he was. Suddenly there were footsteps. Eduardo was coming. I closed the door quickly but didn't have time to get out of there. He appeared in the hallway with a smile that now seemed more like a warning. Curious Camila, you should have stayed at dinner. My heart almost jumped out of my mouth. He was holding a knife and his expression changed completely. The charm had vanished and in its place was something dark, cruel. You think you're different from the others? They all thought the same thing at first. But you know what happens to curious women, don't you? I knew I had to buy time. Eduardo, I just wanted to use the bathroom. I don't know what you're talking about. He laughed. A dry, cold sound. Ah, Camila, don't worry. Soon you'll understand. It's just a matter of time. I needed to think fast. The only certainty I had was that if I didn't act, I would end up like those women in the photos. The sound of his laughter echoed in my head while I tried to stay calm, but inside I was panicking. Eduardo closed the door behind us and blocked the exit. The knife in his hand gleamed under the dim light of the hallway, and I knew that if I didn't do something, this would be my end. Eduardo, listen. You don't need to do this. No one knows I'm here. We can pretend nothing happened, okay? I'll just leave. Ah, Camila, you're good at this. Trying to manipulate with pretty words. But I already know this game. You're not going anywhere. While he spoke, my eyes scanned the room, looking for something, anything that could help me. My fingers touched a heavy candelabra on the table. It was my only chance. He took another step toward me, gripping the knife firmly. My heart raced, and then, without thinking twice, I grabbed the candelabra and threw it with all my strength at his head. The impact was brutal, and Eduardo fell to the floor, holding his head and dropping the knife. I didn't wait to see if he was okay or not. I grabbed the knife and ran, my feet pounding against the wooden floor while he moaned in pain behind me. I knew he wouldn't be unconscious for long. So I ran toward the main door, but to my horror it was locked. With no time to think, I ran toward a window and managed to open it. I jumped outside the house, falling onto the hard ground. The pain in my knee almost stopped me, but fear was greater. Behind me, I heard Eduardo scream. He was more furious than ever. "You think you can run from me, Camila? No one runs from me." I got up and started running, ignoring the pain. The farm was surrounded by dense forest, and the uneven ground made the escape even more difficult. I heard the barking of dogs, and my heart felt like it would explode. Branches tore at my skin as I plunged into the woods, but I couldn't stop. Eduardo's screams and the sound of the dogs grew louder. The darkness of the night was almost total, but adrenaline kept me going. After what seemed like an eternity, I saw a light in the distance. It was a road. I used the rest of the strength I had left to get there. As soon as I stepped onto the asphalt, I saw headlights approaching. A truck stopped beside me and the driver got out, startled to see me bloodied and desperate. "Please help me, he wants to kill me." The man pulled me into the truck and took off at full speed. I looked back and saw Eduardo standing at the edge of the road, his dark silhouette under the headlights. But he didn't follow me. I was safe. When the truck started accelerating, I collapsed in the passenger seat. My body trembled, and tears finally came. The driver, a simple, kind older man, looked at me with concern while trying to calm me down. "Miss, what happened to you? Who was that man?" My voice came out shaky, almost a whisper. He tried to kill me. He's already killed other women. I barely escaped." He asked no more questions, just accelerated toward the nearest city. As soon as we arrived, he took me straight to the police station. I trembled while telling everything to the officers. Every detail of that night seemed worse as it came out of my mouth, but I knew I needed to be strong. The police took my report seriously, especially after I mentioned the room full of photos and personal belongings of other women. A team was sent immediately to Eduardo's farm, and I stayed waiting, surrounded by officers, unable to think about anything but the terror I had been through. Hours later, the news arrived. Eduardo had been arrested. He was trying to flee when the police arrived, but didn't succeed. Inside the house, they found enough evidence to connect him to at least 7 disappearances in the region. It was a relief to hear that, but not complete relief. The images of those photos, those faces, were still engraved in my mind. Express in the comments a personal truth starting with, "I discover that." Because in the moment we acknowledge the strength we found in our darkest hour, we reclaim our narrative from those who tried to silence us, and your discovery today becomes the compass pointing others toward their own survival. The images, women who didn't have the same luck I did. In the days that followed, the media took over the story. Eduardo became the monster of the farm in the headlines, and my name was kept confidential. But that didn't stop me from feeling vulnerable and exposed. I decided to honor the second chance life had given me. I decided to leave my profession and start over. I enrolled in a course and started working with a group that helps women in vulnerable situations. It wasn't easy, but every story I heard reminded me that I had escaped the worst and that I could use my experience to save others. I still wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares. Sometimes I hear his footsteps, the screams, the sound of the dogs. But when that happens, I breathe deeply and remind myself, I survived. This is my story. I don't know how I had the strength to go through all of this, but I hope that by telling what I lived through, other women can learn to listen to their instincts and protect themselves. Because in the world we live in, danger isn't always where we expect it. Working at night has always been a challenge. Some say the early morning hours are peaceful, but for me, they carry constant tension. I know what it's like to walk dark streets, watching every car that passes, trying to identify who's a client and who might be a threat. My name is Vanessa. I'm 26 years old, and I work as an escort. I didn't choose this for glamour. I chose it because it was what I had for today. That night, it was already past 11, and I was thinking about calling it quits. The streets were emptier than normal, and the cold cut through my skin. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I thought about not answering, but money speaks loud, right? Hello, is this Vanessa? The voice was calm, even friendly. Yes, who is this? Eduardo. I need a service, but I wanted something different. It's a short trip. I'll pay double what you're used to. Double. That made my heart beat faster. He seemed polite, not forcing anything. I agreed to meet him at a nearby point, a well-lit avenue. While I waited, I kept thinking, is it worth it? What if it goes wrong? But I really needed the money. I couldn't refuse. His car arrived punctually. A black sedan, elegant but discreet. Eduardo got out. He was handsome, dress shirt, expensive watch, but the smile didn't seem real. He opened the passenger door with a courteous gesture. Good evening, ready? I got in the car, and as soon as he started it, I smelled something strange, something metallic, like rust. I ignored it, thinking it was just my imagination. The conversation at first was calm. He asked normal things, how business was, if I'd been working nights for a long time, until the tone changed. Do you live alone? I lied. I have a boyfriend waiting for me. He laughed lightly, as if he knew it was a lie. I see. Does he know you're here right now? My stomach knotted. I tried to change the subject, but Eduardo started taking a strange route. We were supposed to go to a motel, but he deviated. When I asked, he responded with a tone that was too calm. It's just a shortcut. Faster. The streets became dark, without any signs or houses in sight. I started to feel my chest tighten. Something was wrong. The silence inside the car was suffocating. Eduardo didn't look at me anymore, just at the road. My head was working at 1,000 miles per hour, trying to understand what was happening. That's when I saw it. In the back seat, a thick rope rolled up carelessly. Next to it, a thermos with dark stains. My heart raced. It was as if the air had disappeared from the car. Is everything okay? Are we almost there? I asked, trying to keep my voice firm. Almost there, he responded coldly. The road became even more deserted. There wasn't even a streetlight. My phone was in my purse, but I knew there was no signal. Eduardo turned onto a dirt road and stopped the car near an abandoned warehouse. My entire body froze. I'm going to get something from the trunk. Stay here. As soon as he got out, have you considered how many times we dismiss our survival instinct as paranoia, only to realize later it was the clearest truth we'd ever heard? I knew this was my moment, my only chance. My hand shot to the door handle, but it was locked from the outside. Child lock. He'd planned this. Through the rearview mirror, I saw him opening the trunk, pulling out something I couldn't quite see. Panic flooded every cell in my body. I climbed over to the driver's seat, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. The keys. He'd left the keys. I turned the ignition and the engine roared to life. Eduardo's head snapped up, his face transforming from calm to fury in an instant. He dropped whatever he was holding and started running toward the car. I slammed my foot on the gas. The car lurched forward, tires spinning in the dirt before catching traction. In the mirror, I saw him running after me, his mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear over the engine and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The dirt road was treacherous, full of holes and rocks, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. Branches scraped against the car as I navigated the narrow path, barely able to see in the darkness with only the headlights cutting through. After what felt like forever, I saw it. the main road, illuminated, beautiful, safe. I nearly cried with relief. Tell us in the comments something that begins with, I transform. Because the moment we turn our terror into testimony, our silence into strength, welcoming our trauma into a shield for others, and your transformation might be the catalyst that awakens courage in someone who's still trapped in their own nightmare. I started looking for something, anything inside the car. In the glove compartment, I found a screwdriver. My heart was beating so fast it felt like it would explode. I grabbed the tool and hid it in my purse. Eduardo came back, but now the smile was gone. He opened the passenger door slowly. Come here for a minute. I want to show you something. I tried to argue, but he grabbed my arm. It was instinct. I pulled the screwdriver from my purse and attacked him in the arm. He screamed, surprised, and let me go. That was the time I needed to run. The road seemed infinite. I heard his footsteps behind me, the sound of the flashlight illuminating the ground. Vanessa, come back here. Let's talk, he shouted, but I didn't stop. With each step, I felt I was getting further from becoming a statistic. After what seemed like an eternity, I saw headlights in the distance. It was a truck. I gathered my last strength and ran to the middle of the road, waving my arms. The truck stopped. An older man got out, startled to see me like that, breathless, crying, "Miss, what happened? Please help me. There's a man coming after me." He looked toward the dark path and put me in the cab. Eduardo appeared shortly after, but seeing that I wasn't alone, he turned around and disappeared into the darkness. At the police station, I told everything. The truck driver stayed with me, and while I spoke, I discovered that Eduardo was already wanted for other crimes. He did the same thing with other women, promised easy money, and took them to a tragic end. When I returned home, I was still shaking. That night changed me forever. I survived because I listened to my instinct, but I know many didn't have the same luck. Today, I tell this story to warn other women, because the night has a life of its own, and if you're not careful, it can swallow you whole. My name is Clarice. I'm 29 years old, a luxury escort in Rio de Janeiro, and my life is like high heels, glamorous on the outside, but painful at the end of the day. I work at Eclipse Club, a nightclub that receives the city's big shots. There we pretend everything is perfect, but no one sees what's behind the smile and the shine of the clothes. That Friday, the night was slow. I had already decided to go home when I received a message. It was a new client named Bruno. He seemed rushed, offering double my fee for a meeting that same night. The arrangement was at a distant restaurant in an area I knew was dangerous at night. This doesn't seem like a good idea, I thought, but money spoke louder. I have bills to pay and rent doesn't wait. I called Pedro, my trusted driver, and asked him to take me. He tried to convince me to refuse. "Clarice, this is strange. Better let it go." But I went anyway. When we arrived at the location, a restaurant by a canal, I already felt a chill. The place was empty, with the lights half off. Only the waiter was there, and he seemed suspicious. I sat at a table near the window while Pedro waited in the car. I called Bruno, and he said he was on his way. Typical excuse from someone who's already late. That's when I saw a man standing on the other side of the street near a flickering streetlight. He was wearing a hood with his face partially covered. At first I thought he was just a local resident, but the way he looked at me made my stomach turn. Meanwhile, Pedro left to get fuel, leaving me alone. I locked the car doors and tried to calm myself, but when I looked again, the man had crossed the street. He was coming toward me. My heart raced. He stopped beside the car, staring at me through the window. Before I could do anything, he started banging on the glass. First slowly, then forcefully. In his hand, I saw something gleaming. It was a knife. He was murmuring something I couldn't understand, but the tone of voice was full of hatred. I tried to call Pedro, but remember the last time you felt danger before you could name it, when your body knew the truth before your mind could form the words. My phone had no signal. The restaurant was too far from the main road. I was trapped. The man kept hitting the window harder and harder. The glass was starting to crack. I looked around desperately. The restaurant was closed. The street was deserted. No one was coming to help. Then I remembered the car keys. Pedro had left them in the ignition. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel, but I managed to start the engine. The man's eyes widened in surprise. He stepped back just as I floored the accelerator. The car lurched forward, tires screeching. In the rearview mirror, I saw him standing there, watching me drive away, that knife still in his hand. I didn't stop until I saw lights, people, civilization. I pulled into a gas station and called Pedro, then the police. They told me they'd been looking for that man. He'd attacked 3 other women in that same area in the past month. 2 had survived, 1 hadn't. I sat in that gas station parking lot for hours, waiting for Pedro, unable to stop shaking. The police came, took my statement, but I already knew the truth. Bruno had never existed. It was a setup, a trap designed to leave me alone in the perfect place for that predator to strike. That night, I made a decision. I quit. I left the club, left the life, left everything behind. Some people called me a coward, said I was throwing away good money over one bad experience, but they didn't understand. They didn't see his eyes. They didn't hear the sound of that knife scraping against my window. They didn't feel what it's like to know you're seconds away from becoming another statistic, another name in a police report, another woman who didn't make it home. Today, I work in a coffee shop. The pay is less than a quarter of what I used to make. My apartment is smaller, my clothes are simpler, but when I lock my door at night, I sleep, really sleep, without nightmares, without fear, without constantly looking over my shoulder. I tell this story not for pity, but as a warning. The danger is real, the predators are patient, and sometimes survival means knowing when to walk away, even when everything in your circumstances screams at you to stay. Cuéntanos en los comentarios algo que inicie con "yo acepto que", porque cuando aceptamos que nuestra seguridad vale más que cualquier cantidad de dinero, más que cualquier presión externa, recuperamos el poder que el miedo y la necesidad intentaron arrebatarnos. Y tu aceptación hoy puede ser el permiso que alguien más necesita para finalmente priorizarse e salvarse. Espero que essas histórias sirvam de alerta. Que cada mulher que as ouvir reconheça os sinais, confie em seu instinto e valorize sua vida acima de tudo. Porque no fim, nenhum dinheiro, nenhuma oportunidade vale mais do que voltar para casa em segurança. My phone just kept giving a busy signal. When he started forcing the car door handle, I realized I had no time. The only thing I could do was get out the other side and run. I ran without looking back. My legs barely obeyed me, and the high heel seemed like an enemy. Each strike on the ground echoed like a warning. He's coming. The street was deserted, the lights flickering as if the scenery itself wanted to drive me crazy. I advanced to a convenience store with the lights on, thinking that would be my salvation. When I arrived, I realized it was locked. I started banging on the glass, begging for help, but there was no one there. That's when I heard his footsteps. I didn't need to look to know he was close. I turned the other way and ran toward an alley. I entered without knowing where it would lead and hid behind some cardboard boxes. My breathing was heavy and my heart felt like it would burst out of my mouth. I tried to calm myself, but then I heard his voice. "I know you're here." He was in the alley, kicking boxes and messing with everything around. Each sound made my skin crawl. My only chance was to wait for him to get distracted. When I heard the sound of something falling at the back of the alley, I took advantage and ran out again. I saw a sign indicating an abandoned building nearby. It was my only option. I entered through the side entrance and locked the door behind me with a piece of wood. The place was dark, smelling of mold and rot. I climbed some steps, trying to find a place to hide. On the second floor, I saw a small room with a door still intact. I went in and sat on the floor. I grabbed my phone and tried to call Pedro again. This time he answered. "Clarice, where are you? I'm going back to the restaurant now. I didn't find you there." "I'm in an abandoned building. There was a man. He's following me. Come quick, please." Before he could respond, I heard a noise that made me freeze. Footsteps. He was climbing the stairs. The steps were getting closer and closer. I grabbed a piece of iron I found on the floor, preparing myself for the worst. When he opened the door, I didn't think. I used all my strength and hit him on the head. He stumbled but didn't fall. Before I could escape, he grabbed me by the arm. I screamed and struck him again, this time on the shoulder. He fell to the floor and I ran out of the room. I went down the stairs so fast I almost tripped several times. The sound of his screams echoed through the building, but I couldn't stop. When I reached the exit, I saw the headlights of Pedro's car coming in my direction. "Clarice, get in the car now!" he shouted, stopping the car in the middle of the street. Without thinking, I jumped inside. He accelerated, and I finally felt safe. Later, we went to the police station. I told the officers everything, but when they returned to the building, the man had disappeared. Only blood trails remained behind. After that night, nothing was the same. I decided to leave the work. It wasn't worth the risk, but I still feel like he's out there, waiting, watching. I survived, but I was never the same again. You know that feeling of always being on the edge? Well, that's my life. My name is Clara. I'm 45 years old, and I work as an escort. It's not something I dreamed of doing, but when life gets tough and you have a daughter to raise, you can't always choose. Every night I stand there in front of some motels, waiting for clients. It's been the same spot for years, and I know the flow like the back of my hand. The street is full of stories. Every car that stops is a universe of mysteries, promises, or problems. There are regular clients, those who try to take advantage, and those who just want to forget life for a while. And me? Well, I try to survive in the middle of it all. I always keep an eye on the movement, especially when I see someone who doesn't seem to belong to that world. My sixth sense never fails, but sometimes necessity speaks louder. My friend Paula, who works with me, is always warning me about the dangers. "Clara, these apps are a trap. I've seen women disappear after arranging meetings with these guys," she would say. I always listened, but in practice, we do what we need to do to pay the bills. The street is dangerous, of course, but at least here I see what's in front of me. On the app, it's just a photo and a bunch of pretty words that could be lies. That night, I was especially tired. Cars passed, stopped, some looked at me and moved on. It was the same as always, except deep down, I felt an uneasiness I couldn't explain. Something about that night seemed different. That's when my phone vibrated, a message on the app I used from time to time. His name was Marcelo. The profile picture showed a handsome man, well-groomed, with that air of, "I know what I want." He started with polite conversation, nothing vulgar. He said he was a businessman, that he was in the city on business and wanted something discreet, something special, as he put it. Look, I'm not naive. I've seen it all. But he was different. He didn't seem like one of those guys who looks at you like you're just an object. And what really caught my attention was the amount he offered. It was enough money for me to pay 2 weeks of rent and still have some left over. What happens to us when desperation becomes louder than the warnings written in blood by those who came before us? I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the accept button. Paula's words echoed in my mind, but so did the image of my daughter's face when I told her we might have to move again because I couldn't make rent. I accepted. We arranged to meet at a location he would send later. An hour passed. Then another message came through with an address. It was far, on the outskirts of the city, in an industrial area I barely knew. Red flags were waving in my mind, but I pushed them down. I told myself I'd been doing this for years. I could handle myself. I sent the address to Paula with a simple message. If I don't text you in 2 hours, call the police. She responded immediately with worried emojis, but I was already getting into the taxi. The drive seemed endless. The city lights gradually faded, replaced by dark streets and abandoned warehouses. When we finally arrived, the taxi driver looked at me with concern. "Miss, are you sure this is the right place? There's nothing here." "Yes, I'm sure, thank you." I paid him and watched his taillights disappear into the darkness, suddenly feeling very alone. Comparte tu luz interior en los comentarios con "Yo ilumino", porque cuando encendemos nuestra luz en los lugares más oscuros, cuando compartimos la sabiduría comprada con miedo y pagada con supervivencia, iluminamos el camino para que otras no tropiecen donde nosotras casi caímos. Y tu luz hoy puede ser el faro que salve a alguien de naufragar en su propia noche oscura. I paid him. I could make a good purchase for the house. My daughter Sophia needed new sneakers for school, and well, that money would solve it. "It's dangerous, Clara. Don't get into this." Paula's voice echoed in my head, but at the same time, I thought about the half-empty refrigerator and the overdue electricity bill. I hesitated for a few minutes but ended up responding. We arranged the meeting. He would pick me up by car. The idea made me nervous, but again, money spoke louder. We set it for midnight. While I waited, I felt my stomach churning. Something in me said it was a bad idea, but how do you ignore necessity? When his car stopped in front of me, a black sedan gleaming under the dim streetlight, I took a deep breath and got in. What could go wrong? As soon as I entered the car, that smell of leather and expensive perfume enveloped me. Marcelo smiled at me. It was the same smile from the photo, but in person, there was something strange. He was friendly, I won't lie, but there was something in his eyes that didn't match the rest. You know when you feel like someone's hiding something? That was it. I tried to make conversation while he drove. I asked if he came to the city often, basic things, just to break the silence. He responded, but always with short phrases, as if he wanted to avoid any deeper connection. The atmosphere in the car started to feel heavy, and I couldn't say exactly why. I noticed he was deviating from the route. The main street was left behind, and now we were on increasingly deserted roads. I started to get tense. "Marcelo, the motel isn't in that direction," I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked through the rearview mirror and smiled, but didn't respond. My heart started beating faster. When we finally arrived, the place looked like something out of a horror movie. It was an old motel with few working lights and a facade almost falling apart. A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't the kind of place he had described in the message. At the counter, the receptionist looked at us strangely, as if he wanted to say something but remained silent. He handed over the key and let us proceed. As we walked to the room, the feeling of danger increased. I tried to seem calm, but my mind was already working at full speed. What if I was walking into a trap? "Calm down, Clara. It's just another client," I repeated to myself, trying to control the fear. Deep down, I knew it wasn't like that. When we entered the room, he locked the door with a click that echoed in my head. The room was small, dark, and the air had a strange smell of mold, mixed with something I couldn't identify. Marcelo put my purse in a corner and sat on the bed, watching me in silence for a few seconds. That gave me chills. He started asking questions that had nothing to do with what we'd agreed on. "Do you have family? Does anyone know where you are right now?" Each question seemed more invasive than the last. I tried to answer without giving too many details, but my voice trembled. He noticed. "You're nervous, Clara?" he asked with a smile that had nothing friendly about it. That's when my fear turned into terror. Suddenly, he took his phone out of his pocket and started messing with something. I don't know why, but that raised even more alarms. "They'll be here soon," he spoke softly, almost to himself. "Everything's ready." My heart raced. I knew I needed to act fast. I tried to stay calm and said I needed to use the bathroom. He hesitated, but eventually agreed. I walked to the bathroom. my legs barely holding me up. Once inside, I locked the door and looked around desperately. There was a small window, high up, but maybe big enough for me to squeeze through. My hands were shaking as I climbed onto the toilet, trying to reach it. Behind me, I heard him moving around the room. Then his voice closer to the door. "Clara, you okay in there?" "Yes, just a minute," I managed to say, my voice cracking. The window was stuck. Years of paint and rust had sealed it shut. I pushed with all my strength, my fingernails breaking against the frame. "Please, please, please." Finally, it gave way with a screech that seemed impossibly loud. "Clara?" His voice was different now, suspicious, angry. I didn't wait. I pulled myself up, squeezing through that narrow opening, feeling the rough edges scrape against my skin. I heard the bathroom door slam open just as my legs cleared the window. I fell hard onto the pavement outside, pain shooting through my ankle, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I ran into the darkness of that abandoned parking lot, my breath coming in ragged gasps, hearing his shouts behind me, but not daring to look back. The street was empty, no cars, no people, just flickering streetlights and the sound of my own footsteps. I ran until I saw lights, a gas station in the distance. Safety, life. I burst through the doors, startling the attendant, my clothes torn, blood on my arms from the window, tears streaming down my face. "Please," I gasped, "please call the police." The attendant's eyes widened, and he immediately reached for the phone. I collapsed against the counter, my body finally giving in to the trembling I'd been holding back. I was alive. Somehow, impossibly, I was alive. When the police arrived, they told me I was the lucky one. Marcelo wasn't his real name. He was part of a trafficking ring. The motel was a collection point. If I hadn't escaped through that window, I would have been the 5th woman to disappear that month. 5th. I think about that number every day. 4 women who didn't get a second chance. 4 women whose instincts they ignored, whose desperation led them to the same trap. 4 women who have families still wondering where they are. I quit that night, not gradually, not after one more job. That night, I found work at a laundromat, then at a diner. The money is less, much less. Sophia still doesn't have those new sneakers. We eat rice and beans most nights, but I'm here. I tuck her into bed every night. I see her smile every morning, and that's worth more than any amount of money a stranger could offer. I tell my story, not because I'm proud of the choices I made, but because I survived the consequences. If one woman reads this and decides to trust that voice inside that whispers danger, if one woman chooses safety over desperation, then maybe those 4 women didn't disappear for nothing. Escribe en los comentarios una declaración que comience con "Yo acepto que", porque cuando aceptamos que nuestra vida vale más que cualquier cantidad de dinero, que nuestra intuición merece ser escuchada por encima de nuestras necesidades y que pedir ayuda no es debilidad, sino la mayor fortaleza, transformamos nuestra supervivencia en sabiduría que puede salvar a quien aún no sabe que está en peligro. Y tu aceptación hoy puede ser el permiso que alguien más necesita para finalmente valorar su propia vida por encima de cualquier circunstancia. The night still calls to some women. Desperation still whispers that one more risk won't hurt. But I'm here to say that it can. It almost did for me. Listen to that voice. Trust that instinct. Your life is worth more than any promise, any amount, any temporary solution. Because in the end, nothing is temporary about death. And survival, painful and imperfect as it is, will always be better than the alternative. He agreed, saying it won't take long, while following me with his eyes. I entered the bathroom and locked it. My mind was racing. There had to be a way out. That's when I saw the window, small, high up. It wasn't big enough to pass through comfortably, but I had no choice. As I climbed onto the toilet to reach the window, I heard Marcelo banging on the door. "Clara, is everything okay in there?" He was no longer so calm. His voice had a tone of impatience that made me freeze. "Just a minute," I shouted, trying to buy time. I managed to open the window, but hearing the sound of the door handle being forced made me accelerate. "Open this door now!" he screamed. I didn't think twice. I squeezed through the window, feeling my skin scrape on the narrow edge. I fell on the other side onto damp ground. My body trembled with fear, but my legs knew I had to run. I hit the ground with a thud that made my whole body hurt. The cold night air and the feeling of wet earth brought me back to reality. I needed to run. I got up quickly, ignoring the pain in my knees and elbows, and started running as fast as I could. Behind me, I heard Marcelo screaming. He was furious. The sound of something breaking, maybe the bathroom door, echoed in the air, and my heart raced. It was an isolated area, with no lights nearby, just a dark road surrounded by trees. My shoes slipped on the dirt, and my breathing came in short, uneven gasps. With each step, I felt like he was getting closer, as if his presence was a shadow growing behind me. The silence of the night made everything seem more terrifying. Only the sound of my footsteps and his screams cut through the darkness. Finally, I reached the road. The cold asphalt under my feet was a small relief, but I knew I wasn't safe. I looked back and didn't see anyone, but that didn't reassure me. Adrenaline told me to keep going. That's when I spotted headlights in the distance. A car was coming in my direction. I raised my arms and started waving frantically, screaming for help. "Please, stop, help!" The car slowed down, and to my surprise, it was the motel receptionist. He looked at me confused and frightened, but when he saw me in that state, he immediately let me in. "What happened?" he asked as he accelerated. I told him everything the best I could, still trying to catch my breath. He was shocked. "I knew there was something wrong with that guy," he said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. A figure appeared on the road. It was Marcelo running, but now he looked exhausted. He tried to block the car, but the receptionist didn't stop. We drove straight past him, and I felt a mixture of relief and fear. What would have happened if he had caught up with us? My head spun with that question, but one thing was certain. I'd escaped by a hair. We arrived at the police station, and the receptionist accompanied me to file a complaint. There, I discovered that Marcelo was already wanted by the police for crimes against women. My report would be a key piece in finally getting him arrested, knowing that was a small consolation amid the chaos of that night. After I gave my statement, I sat in a small, cold room at the police station. The receptionist stayed by my side, offering words of comfort. I was trembling, not just from cold, but from pure shock. My hands still hurt from the cuts I made squeezing through the window, and my knees were scraped. But what hurt most was my head. It was as if everything was repeating in my mind in an endless loop. One of the officers approached and gave me more information about Marcelo. He was known for luring women with false promises, kidnapping them, and, well, I don't need to say the rest. Hearing that made me realize how close I had come to being just another statistic. My hands were sweating and my throat was dry. I felt the weight of luck, but also of guilt. Why me? Why did I manage to escape when so many others didn't have the same chance? The receptionist drove me home. On the way, he talked about how he had already suspected Marcelo as soon as he showed up at the motel. Some people have a different look, you know. I didn't know what to do, but I decided to follow my instinct. "Good thing there was time," he said. I thanked him with a choked voice. Without that simple gesture, I wouldn't be alive. When I finally got home, I found my daughter Sophia sleeping on the couch with the TV on. I sat next to her and watched her for a long time. She was the reason I did everything I did. But that night, I realized I couldn't continue like this anymore. I couldn't risk so much and run the risk of leaving my daughter alone in the world. I needed to find another way to support us. I spent the following days rethinking my life. That encounter with Marcelo was a turning point. It wasn't just the scare, it was the warning I needed. I decided to seek help, look for new options. It wouldn't be easy, but I was determined. Today, every time I think about that night, I feel a mixture of fear and relief. It was close, very close. I don't want to be another victim. I want to be someone who had the chance to change their own story. And as hard as it is, I'm going to make it. I'll never forget that night. No matter how much time passes, the memories still appear in my dreams and make me wake up in a cold sweat. Working at the Diamante Notturno nightclub was already a roller coaster in itself. Loud music, drunk clients, exaggerated laughter, invasive looks. I knew it wasn't the safest job in the world, but honestly, it paid the bills. From the beginning of that night, something seemed out of place. I remember looking at the crowd coming through the nightclub door, quickly assessing who seemed like a potential problem. That had become a habit. We learned to read people. The environment was packed, and the bar, as always, was chaos. I ran from one side to the other, opening bottles, delivering drinks, and exchanging automatic smiles. But then he appeared. He was different, tall, with a fixed stare that was uncomfortable. Dressed in a poorly ironed dress shirt, he didn't fit the environment. When he reached the counter, he ordered a neat whiskey. His voice was low, almost a murmur. But there was something about the way he spoke that made me uncomfortable. "Mariana, right?" he said, looking at my name tag before I had a chance to respond. I didn't respond immediately. I just delivered the drink and turned to serve another customer. But he kept watching me, as if waiting for something. The first interaction was strange, but I continued with my work. Unfortunately, he didn't stop there. Each time he came back to the counter, he seemed more insistent and drunker. "You're beautiful, you know," he said with a smile that wasn't friendly at all. "Thank you, but I'm busy right now," I responded, trying to be polite. "I'm not complimenting you, I'm stating a fact. You should really thank me." I ignored him and kept serving. The problem was that he didn't accept being ignored. He started banging his glass on the counter, complaining loudly. I knew that would attract attention, but there wasn't much I could do. "Look here, I just want to talk. Why are you treating me like this?" I forced a smile, but was starting to get worried. When he grabbed my arm, I felt a chill run up my spine. "Let me go," I said more firmly. He let go, but kept laughing. One of the security guards looked in his direction, but the guy acted fast, leaving the counter and going to the dance floor. I thought he had given up, but I was wrong. It was almost midnight when he came back, now more aggressive. He went around the side of the bar, and before I could react, he was on the inside. He pushed glasses to the floor, threw the tray of lemons away, and shouted, "You're going to listen to me now, Mariana." I froze. He was inches away from me, and I smelled the strong odor of alcohol. I tried to think fast, but my body was frozen. A co-worker tried to pull him away, but took such a strong push that he fell against the bottle shelves. It was instinct. I ran to the stockroom and locked the door behind me. Inside, trembling, I pressed my ear to the door. I could hear the screams outside, the sound of breaking glass, and hurried footsteps. The minutes felt like hours. When the sounds diminished, I heard a colleague scream my name. "Mariana, come out! He ran away!" I opened the door slowly, my heart still racing. The nightclub was chaos. Tables overturned, broken bottles. The security guard said he escaped before the police arrived. I wanted to believe it was over, but my body was still on alert. After that night, my life changed. I couldn't go back to work without feeling my stomach turn every time a drunker client came close. I started having nightmares. Sometimes it was as if he was watching me everywhere. I tried to move forward, but the truth is that it affected me in a way I couldn't explain. I sought help. A psychologist helped me understand that it wasn't my fault, that I did what I could to survive. Besides, I started talking with other women from the nightclub. I discovered that many of them had gone through similar situations but had never reported or spoken openly. It was always the fear of losing their job or not being taken seriously. we decided to unite. We made a petition asking for more security at the nightclub and managed to get some changes, like better trained security guards and cameras at the bar. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Today, when I look back, I feel a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief for being alive, for having managed to get out of that situation. Sadness for knowing that so many other women still face this every day. I decided not to let my story be just another one. I talked about what happened in support groups, in talks, and even on social media. I want other women to know they're not alone, that it's possible to ask for help, and most importantly, that they're not to blame for what happens. That was my last night at Diamante Nocturno. I knew I needed to move forward, find a place where I could feel safe, and that's what I did. Now, every time I tell my story, I hope that someone, somewhere, listens and decides to protect themselves before it's too late. Because in the end, fear can never be greater than our will to live. Déjame en los comentarios tu reflexión comenzando con "Yo me comprometo a", porque cuando nos comprometemos a valorar nuestra intuición por encima de cualquier presión externa, a reconocer que nuestra seguridad no es negociable y a transformar nuestro miedo en acción protectora, nos convertimos en guardianas no solo de nuestra propia vida, sino de todas las que vendrán después. Y tu compromiso hoy puede ser el escudo que proteja a alguien mañana de repetir nuestros errores. These stories are real. The danger is real. But so is your strength. So is your intuition. So is your right to survive. Listen to that voice inside. It's not paranoia. It's wisdom. It's the collective experience of every woman who came before you, warning you, protecting you, guiding you home. Trust it, always.